right, the Penn State Blitz here on PennLive. Spring is in the air, Greg
Yes.
Pickel, and I think before we get started, we got 4 downs to discuss some Penn State news all over the board.
Yeah.
But just a reminder to the Penn State football fans, you got to check out our website. It's youtube.com/allpennstate. And we're going to talk a lot about a certain quarterback.
Yes.
Penn State quarterback, early, first down, Trace McSorley, a couple weeks removed from spring practice. A lot of people are starting kind of putting it together that this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, it took a while.
Do you feel he is underappreciated, or do you think that, you know, in the right circles he is kind of getting the credit he deserves?
Yeah,
Trace?
Bob, I think that in national circles, he's going to have the appropriate amount of respect from a large college football perspective by the time the season gets here.
Right.
I think right now people are just starting to sort of wake up to the fact of how good this kid is. Of course, the caveat that comes with it now is will he do it without Joe Moorhead, without Saquon Barkley,
Right.
Mike Gesicki, Deshaun Hamilton, etc. So I do think that there's a little bit of hesitation from some folks that have been watching him from afar, maybe not as appreciative or aware of his numbers, what he's done with this Penn State offense. But as the preseason, post-spring top 25s and All-Americans and this ranking, that list, the other things all start to come out, he's a guy that's really picked up a lot of buzz of late. I think he's appreciated in the Penn State circles and maybe the Big Ten circles, but nationally, I think he's going to start to get his due here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and let's not forget, he was, until James Franklin got here, he was going to go to Vanderbilt. He was
Right.
only really a 3-star coming out of Virginia. No one really knew what to expect. For me, the second half of that first game, the Tax Slayer Bowl, I thought was really a good indication of what kind of person, what kind of quarterback they were getting.
Yeah.
He's the kind of kid, which I think he doesn't get enough credit for. He's the kind of player that he doesn't necessarily always start strong,
Right.
but he has a knack for kind of figuring things out in most games against good teams that he plays, and if he doesn't start strong,
Right.
he really closes strong. You saw what he did against Georgia, and he's continued to do that. He's continued to get better. His completion percentage is impressive. But yeah, I think when you look at the Big Ten, Greg, it's actually last year, you know, they didn't really talk about the quarterbacks in the Big Ten. It was really just J.T. Barrett and Trace. I think this year it's a little bit more interesting. I think the Big Ten East itself is going to be it's going to be very interesting to see how the quarterbacks develop, because there's some good players, I think, coming in to the conference.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Joe Burrows leaves Ohio State, which, as we just talked about before we started getting going here, that pretty much says all you need to know about Dwayne Haskins at this point.
Right.
I mean, they have some other guys on the roster there as well, but, I mean, it feels like he's the guy. So you have him, you have Shea Patterson now eligible at Michigan, and obviously he comes highly regarded from Ole Miss. Trace is at the top of the Big Ten list heading into the season,
Right.
but you're right, there's a lot of guys that could, you know, certainly will try to unseat him by the time December gets here.
Don't forget about Brian Lewerke, the
Yep.
Michigan State quarterback who threw for 400 on Penn State last year in the rain. And also, I don't know how I feel about the Wisconsin quarterback, Alex Hornibrook.
Yeah.
He can always, sometimes he doesn't look very good. He played very good in their bowl win over Miami. I think threw for 4 touchdowns. I bring him up because Penn State's going to play Wisconsin at Beaver Stadium. So I do think with Penn State's schedule, when you consider they got to play at Michigan, Ohio State's coming in, they got to play Wisconsin, some other challenging games, Michigan State. I think if Trace has a good year, and I think we're especially bringing him up now because of Baker Mayfield going #1 overall.
Right.
Similar body type, similar size, dual threat. So I think people are kind of, the light bulb just went off and said, hey, Trace kind of can do a lot of the same things that Baker Mayfield could do. He plays in a spread. Is he going to have a year that Baker just had? I think it's a little early, especially considering who they lost. But I do think if he does better what he did the last 2 years, he's going to be right in the thick of, when we get to our second down, the Heisman Trophy race.
Yes.
Is he a deserving candidate? And is he on pace to be Penn State's best quarterback? I'm talking about as a college player.
Yeah, I mean, I think to start it off with the Heisman Trophy part of it, at 10-1, probably a little low for my liking.
Yeah.
I think I'd need, with everything they lose going into the season, I mean, you look at Will Grier at West Virginia, you look at Khalil Mack at Arizona, or Khalil Tate, rather, at Arizona. There's a couple other guys out there, the Milton kid from UCF. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, very talented quarterbacks are across the country. I'm sure I'm missing a few. But, yeah, I think at 10-1, maybe a little bit low, but he certainly should be in the conversation. conversation. I mean, when we're going into the season, Saquon Barkley should have been in it last year as well.
Right.
He was. It didn't work out by the time the season actually ended. But if you're going to talk about going into the season, guys that are in the kind of offenses to put up the kind of numbers you need to win the Heisman, you're 100% right. He has every bit of the intangible and the on-field success to say he should be in the conversation. Of course, they have to replace a lot, but you're right. You just nailed it a minute ago. If they beat all these teams that come in and they go to on their schedule the top of the top, yeah, he's going to be in that conversation, no question about it.
And Penn State's had some pretty good quarterbacks that have kind of been factors a little bit in the Heisman. Kerry Collins, who was the first-round pick of the Carolina Panthers, I think was in the Heisman conversation. Michael Robinson, who didn't really come out of nowhere, but he had that great year in 2005, and a lot of people kind of looked at him as he's not. Trace isn't really the same as Michael. Michael was essentially a running back playing quarterback. Trace is more well-rounded, I think, as a thrower.
Yeah.
But Chuck Fusina is another name that was in the Heisman conversation, and also Todd Blackledge. So there's been some good quarterbacks at Penn State, but not lately, not like Trace. He's a little bit different, I think, than all of those guys. But yeah, I do think, and you can even start with the Pittsburgh game when they play them early. If he comes out of September and they're undefeated, I think, and he has some good numbers, he's absolutely going to be on a very short list. It's really the Heisman's really a quarterback's award now. You have to be, if Saquon Barkley can't win the Heisman Trophy, it's really going to be hard for a running back to do it. So the question is, who's going to have the pinball game type numbers? Mayfield's numbers were incredible. I don't know that Trace will put up numbers that really approach what Baker did at Oklahoma, but meaningful games, veteran quarterback. I think he's got the nation's attention, and I think he just has to kind of improve a little bit. He's going to be right there.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is the Big 12 will never be the Big 10 from a defensive perspective.
Correct.
So that's what Trace has to go up against. But keeping that in mind, again, Penn State's schedule sets up that if they win, they'll obviously put themselves in. If they beat, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, you're talking about a college football playoff team, assuming there's no stumble that it's not anticipated along the way, and you put college football playoff in 4. Top 25, 3 top 10 wins, however it'll end up shaking out on your resume, yeah, you're probably going to be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony.
All right, third down here on the Penn State Blitz. Let's talk a little Coaches Caravan.
Let's do it.
I know you and I are excited because it's minimal stops this year.
That's
James Franklin caravanning in the greater Penn State area. I think D.C., New York, the Philadelphia area.
Yep.
Sadly, I don't think we're going to make any of the stops. I know you're pretty brokenhearted.
Bummed.
But James Franklin's going to be available, Greg. And what are some questions, maybe in a perfect world, if you could answer them? What would you like to ask James, and what would you like to get an answer about?
Yeah. I mean, I think as we look at May here, June, July, August, the question really becomes. There's a couple ones that come up often. The transfer is always the biggest one. Once the spring semester ends, a lot of people start to wonder: is anyone going to look for greener pastures? Is anyone going to, see the writing on the wall that they're not going to play maybe as much as they want, and therefore they take their credits that they got in the spring semester and decide to go somewhere else? So I think that's one question that always comes up at these events in May. It's usually not answered, but it's always among the top of the curiosity list. So be curious to see about that. And I think beyond that, it's just, where things stand is probably would be more for Sandy Barbour, who's also on the Caravan. But where things stand with all these renovations. We heard this great master plan a while ago now, and Beaver Stadium wasn't necessarily at the top of the list. That was, a part of the plan that was way down the road. But there's a lot to get done, and it'd be interesting to hear where exactly things stand from a fundraising perspective. A lot of fans are ready to see, what can be new, what can be done, and they've done a lot already, but the desire to improve never stops. So,
how about beers at Beaver Stadium for Sandy? That's a question for Sandy. I think they had, alcohol sales in the suites or something?
I believe
but not to the general public.
Right.
I bet you the average fan would probably want to ask Sandy a question about that and get a straight answer.
Right.
So I think hopefully that day is coming.
Yeah,
maybe beers in the press box.
Sure,
that would be a question for me. I don't know if I get a straight answer from her, but in all seriousness, with James, if we could get straight answers, how many guys is he really looking at middle linebacker? It would be one.
Yeah.
How healthy is Torrance Brown, the veteran defensive end?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Is he in the plan for the rotation in the fall? And who's going to be the right guard? Is Michael Mennett really the guy? Are they going to move Bates, or are they content with 3 veteran tackles? And that means maybe Will Fries takes a seat. Also, is there going to be a tight end show up at all to the party in 2018? All good questions. I'm sure James would probably answer a couple of them the way that only he can, But I think we're going to have to wait until August.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be some real interesting questions because there's a couple of blue chips arrive. And I think by the end of August, those are going to be some questions about Mr. Slade and Mr. Shorter that I think James is he going to give them the green light?
Right. Yeah, and we'll wait and see.
Okay, 4th down recruiting news. That's why you're here. One of the reasons why you're here. Do you really think there will be beer in the press box? I don't know.
No.
It's like a deep thought, maybe wishful thinking. I don't think my boss would appreciate me asking that question. But moving on to the recruiting.
Yes.
Penn State remains in the thick of it for a couple of 4-stars. Do you have some updates or any thoughts on maybe a possible commitment or two?
Yeah, it's a waiting game at this point. May 18th, Antonio Alfano, the 4-star end from New Jersey, will make his decision, as will Devyn Ford, the 4-star Fredericksburg, Virginia running back. Alabama, Georgia, Penn State for Alfano, Virginia Tech, Penn State for Ford. So Penn State has been slow on the recruiting trail. There's no question about that. 3 commitments so far in the class of 2019. We've talked about how the recruiting calendar changes with the official visits in May and June have really slowed things down, but they had the chance to get the dominoes rolling here. I'm sure we'll get into it more next week, but for now it's something to look forward to, as there really hasn't been a ton to write home about on the recruiting front since, Caden Walls commits the offensive guard at the blue-white game. Before that, though, you have to go back to, the Taquan Roberson, the quarterback, committed in October. And then Keaton Ellis was the first one in the class last September. But other than that, it has been a slow go. Other schools around the country are sort of getting on the roll here. The dominoes are falling. Penn State's still outside the top 30 nationally. The good news is it's only going to take a couple recruits to jump back into the top 20, top 15, and those things really don't matter at the end of the day. But at some point, you do have to get some dominoes to fall. I think Penn State soon is going to get at least 1, maybe 2.
Real quick, by the end of the recruiting cycle, how many kids do you think Penn State can take? What's a good number for the fans to look for? Because they're only at 3 now.
Yeah, I mean, let's start there. So 3 now. I would say by the start of the season, they probably will be disappointed if they don't have 8 or 9, maybe 10. I just think that you're going to see a lot of summer decisions, June, July, early August at the absolute latest. I would be surprised if this class isn't threatening, if not over double digits by them. Total, I mean, it depends what kind of, the transfers and all that kind of stuff. The guys that don't come back, guys that leave for the NFL. I don't know, 18 to 20 probably seems like a good number at this point in time based on what we know about the roster.
All right, that's the 4th down there on the Penn State Blitz. Do we have any questions or comments? Do we need to rehash your Kentucky Derby pick, Greg?
No, let's talk about yours. The big
that's
man.
right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I believe it was. I believe you did have Justify. I believe I did not. So there's a couple of questions about the non-conference schedule. That always seems to be the popular question when we
future
get
or
into
current?
Future. There's always questions about currently we're looking at. Will Penn State ever get the SEC back on their schedule? What about Miami? Auburn is on the non-conference schedule. That's not too terribly far away. It's probably further away than most would like, but it is on the schedule. I think a lot of people forget about that, and why wouldn't they? Because it's like 5 years down the road. But I do think that it's a fair question, but non-conference scheduling, Bob, we've heard Sandy Barbour talk about it at length. James Franklin's talked about it at length. When you play 9 conference games, and you don't know exactly how the selection committee values non-conference games. Look at Washington, for example, getting in with that non-conference schedule. If you don't have to play tough games, why would you?
Yeah. I think one attractive game is fine. I think they have Virginia Tech coming up on the schedule at some point in the next couple of years. But you're right.
West Virginia.
A lot of Big Ten scheduled games. Plus, then you got to play the Big Ten title game. So the Big Ten schedule really kind of takes care, I think, of the scheduling difficulty itself. They play Pittsburgh this year on the road, and I just don't know when that series resumed. I thought it might be a little bit more anticipated than it actually has been through 2 games, and I don't know if the fan base is very excited about going out to Heinz Field this year, because I don't know how good Pittsburgh's going to be. But yeah, I mean, it's you look at Michigan's playing Notre Dame this year. Ohio State almost always plays, a thumper in their non-conference schedule, and I think Penn State's trying to do what they can. But I mean, they got to play all those teams anyway, and I just think that you just have to be patient and wait for some of these good games to come up, like the Auburn game and the Virginia Tech game and the West Virginia game. So we'll see, but I wouldn't be too upset with Penn State about their non-conference schedule.
All right, we have one on YouTube, youtube.com/allpennstate. Trap games, they're always road games, Joe asked, and he's saying, looking to 2018 schedule, who's the trap game for you? His pick is Indiana. My pick is Illinois. What do you think?
Yeah. Boy, Illinois has a lot of work to do. I mean...
Yeah, so my problem is this. First Friday night game, Penn State's never done it before.
Sure.
It's the week before Ohio State,
Correct.
so you have the look-ahead spot. And you're 2 weeks removed from Pitt, which, I mean, I don't know how big of a deal that is, but, I mean, not that you'll be beat up after a week against Kent State, but the Pitt game figures to be, you know, a pretty all-out affair. So I just think it's a weird spot, a Friday night game, and then you're looking ahead knowing you have a little bit of extra downtime before Ohio State, not to mention the fact that you're looking ahead to Ohio State in a whiteout. Not that Penn State will lose. Illinois is really bad. I looked at their roster for a while. I mean, and Lovie Smith, I'm not sure if he's just collecting a paycheck or what, but look, they're bad, but the spot, I mean, if you're ever looking for a game where Penn State could only be up like 10-6 at the half and then blow them out in the second half, that could be it.
Yeah, I think I'd lean more towards Indiana only because the last couple times Penn State's went out there, it took a 92-yard run by Bill Belton. That was a 13-7 game, and even in the 2016, the year they won the Big Ten title, they were losing in the fourth quarter.
Right.
He does know how to kind of
they haven't had too many issues with that.
Yeah, the coach is pretty good defensively. I know they had 45, but they kind of shut down Saquon Barkley last year. They have a quarterback, I think his name is Peyton Ramsey, who's not bad. They did lose some players.
Is Sandra Diamont still there? I feel like he was there for the better part of 10 years. Yeah.
I do think Penn State has a lot of their toughest games at home this year. So if you're going to go with a trap game that's on the road, it's because Michigan clearly is not a trap game. That's just a tough team they're going to play.
Right.
I think right now I would vote for Indiana, but I'm just not sure, you know, how big of a scare that'll be. I don't think Penn State's going to be too worried about Illinois.
All right, last one. Where should, not where is, Penn State be ranked going into the season? At this point, that comes from Wes on Facebook. At this point, I've seen them anywhere from, I believe Stuart Mandel, The Athletic, had them as low as 16. I've seen some other rankings have them as high as 5 or 6.
Yeah.
What do you think?
A lot of losses. They lost Barkley. They lost 8 starters on defense. Deshaun Hamilton, Mike Gesicki. I had them slightly outside the top 10. I think 11 or 12 is probably fair, and I think that's, you know, their schedule is such that they can kind of creep up. They beat Ohio State. They're going to be in the top 4, top 3, but they still, the rest of the schedule is challenging. I think this is their toughest schedule since James has been there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the fact that you have Wisconsin on the crossover pretty much takes care of that fact. Yeah, anywhere between 8 and 12 would be fair to me. The one thing about top 25s is they're often made with, and people just throw the losses out the window for whatever reason and just use the back class. Now, it's hard to do that it's hard to not be aware of Saquon Barkley and Mike Gesicki and some of the guys on defense when you're doing that. So I think that will drop them a bit. I could live with anywhere 8 to 12. I think that's fair. And you know what? Even 16 was, like I said, that Stuart Mandel had. I can get that too. It's all depending on how you grade the losses versus what you think the replacements can do. And there's plenty of question marks at a few key spots.
All right, I like it. That's it for this edition of the Penn State Blitz.